You are a football player. How do you get to become a professional athlete and have OCD at the same time?
Honestly, sometimes I ask myself that question. I look back now and I genuinely can't believe that that's where I was and that's what I went through. It's just like exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And I just felt like this detective, constant 24/7. There's no rest for your brain. I wasn't even paying attention to the training sessions. I wasn't, listening to what the coach was saying. I was completely in my own world. And one of my all-time favourite quotes is, "Rule your mind or it will rule you." When I was younger, I'd look at it and I'd appreciate it and I'd like it, but I wouldn't act on it. The difference is acting on it and being brave enough not to quit, brave enough to put yourself in a vulnerable position or an uncomfortable position to be able to make yourself stronger, to make the next step.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. I am very excited today to have Millie Farrow with us. Hi, Millie. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm really good, thank you.
Well, and thank you for joining. You are officially the longest away from me guest so far in doing the podcast. So really, really thrilled to have you here today. You are a football player. In the U.S., we would say soccer. Do you find that funny that what we call football barely involves a foot touching a ball, where in your country it's all about a foot touching the ball, or do you think it's just weird, this soccer term? I'm always curious when I meet people. What do you think about it?
I mean, yeah, I guess it is a little bit weird, but obviously I had to get used to it when I came out to the States for a while. So honestly, yeah. I'm indifferent about it. I don't want to start any arguments.
All right. Well, we'll move on to something a little different then. Billy, you've been very open about your own struggles with OCD, and your openness is so appreciated because the more people, of course, speak about this, the more the stigma reduces. So what has really inspired you throughout your life to break that stigma and get out there and tell the world about what you've struggled with and how you've worked on overcoming that?
Yeah, so I think the struggle was what caused me to, want to do something about it in terms of being a vulnerable person and getting my story out there. I think because I was diagnosed with OCD so young, I was 14, I think, and I definitely had it before I was diagnosed with it, if that makes sense, because obviously when it started to happen, I had no idea what was going on, and, I didn't understand it myself, but it was something that I'd never heard of before, and, it was a very new thing, I think, even to some of my closest people around me as well. Had never really heard of it before. So, the fact that I was going through that and the struggle that I had, it kind of just made me want to help people, and so that's what I sort of set out to do and hopefully have. And I think just from being honest about it and accepting that is what I was going through, is, being able to talk about my experiences, that automatically does, help people and help people see that they're not alone.
And you even wrote a book, Brave Enough Not to Quit, where you really detailed your life and your experiences and the role that OCD has played and how it's affected sport and all of those things. I want to ask you right off the bat, because I think it's important to dispel myths. There are people without OCD who very often say, wouldn't it be great to have a little OCD? It must really help you be better organized or things. Have you ever... I'm hoping where you're going. Would you say, oh yeah, OCD's been great and really helpful, or would you say something a little different than that, maybe for those watching?
I mean, I would definitely say something different. I mean, I know I've been warned about swearing, but so I won't do it.
Oh no, you can swear. It's okay. Don't listen to Cynthia. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's been a lot of occasions in my life where I've heard people sort of say, "Oh, I've got OCD," or I need to do this, and it's just, it's not OCD unless it really truly affects your life, and if I'm being honest, it made my life an absolute misery. So if I'd never wish it upon anyone, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And again, with what you've written in the book and the details that you describe, you really give people an insight into what it's like to have to live with this and struggle with this. And I think what I'm really interested in is going from 14 years old, you're diagnosed, but you're playing and you're getting better and better. You have coaches. How does this strive to be the best, but then OCD, which only sends messages to you that you're the worst? How do you get to become a professional athlete and have OCD at the same time?
Honestly, sometimes I ask myself that question. I think from a young age, I wanted to be a footballer before women even could be. And it's always been something that I've wanted to do. But from a young age, I struggled with anxiety, which, eventually is manifested into OCD, and it really took a toll on my life and obviously my mental health. And just sort of being a normal kid, there's the pressure of wanting to get better at football and being scouted for different teams and the England national team youth age groups and things like that. And those things on their own are, high pressure situations which athletes and people that want to do well will experience a bit of anxiety maybe, or a bit of pressure, but try to achieve those things while tackling OCD it was horrendous. And yeah, I mean, I look back now and I genuinely can't believe that that's where I was and that's what I went through, and how I'm even, still here being able to talk about it, because at the time I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, and I had no idea what was going to happen.
Yeah, it's such an amazing journey to get where you are, and you've traveled the world now and are very well known, and I'm going to bet there were times in your life, though, that it doesn't matter how famous you are. You probably at times felt very alone and misunderstood because your own brain was in many ways working against you in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is because being a professional athlete and someone that younger people look up to you and see you as a role model, and I felt like I needed to be, take some responsibility, and instead of just being a role model, be a real model and actually talk about issues in life that, anyone and everybody may have to tackle at some point. And obviously I cover different areas of things in the book, like my injuries and the mental health issues, and obviously there's a huge part of OCD in there because it did play such a big part in my life. But yeah, that's honestly the reason why I put pen to paper and got it out there,
And I'm glad you brought that up because, OCD, of course, loves a stressor. So what could be more stressful to a professional athlete than being injured, right? And how did OCD grab on to the injuries and bring more doubt or shame or guilt or anxiety into your life?
I think, yeah, it's a lot. And I think I had my first major injury when I was 15. So I tore my ACL at 15, and I didn't really understand how severe that injury was at the time. And I didn't really compute that I wasn't going to be playing for near enough a year. And being at that point in your sort of playing I'm very young. That's where I was starting to get opportunities with the national team and Chelsea and things like that. So to be on the sidelines when you're trying to sort of prove yourself, it's, you know, that in itself is a battle. And then also trying to tackle the OCD, like you say, like it's just having that draining you of your energy while you're trying to recover from an injury to get back to doing what you actually want to do as a job, to make a career out of it and earn money and, you know, just real life things, if you know what I mean. So it was always something that played a massive part in dragging me down and holding me back, basically. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
It is so unfortunate, right, that our own mind can be our worst enemy in these types of situations. You have been very open too about even struggles with treatment and buying into treatment, you know, doing it. I think that's really inspiring for a lot of people who, you know, might hear, "Oh, just go to therapy, you'll be fine." And there are ups and downs even to getting into it. What has your journey with therapy been like?
Yeah, definitely. I think, first of all, it's a big part of it is being able to recognize that you need the help. So the initial, right, I want to do something about this. I'm going to do something about this, and taking that step, because I think there's so many people that may be, you know, a little bit in denial about how severe their problem might be. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, before I went to therapy, well, I saw multiple therapists, but there was a few times I convinced myself that no, like I'm fine. I can deal with it. I can handle it. And, you know, weeks would pass and it would just all snowball and everything would overflow, and I would have to go. But I think when it comes to therapy, I think it's a hard one, because I don't believe that just any therapist can help anyone. Right. I feel like, you know, there's a level of trust that needs to be built. Also, I feel like certain personalities, you know, clash or do blend well together. So I think it's a relationship you build with someone, isn't it? Really, you trust them to help you, and they trust you to tell them the truth about everything that you're thinking and feeling. Yeah, to enable the help to happen. Yeah.
That rapport is so key, right? And we know that there are people who have even kind of gone backwards if the therapy is not a good evidence-based treatment as well too, where maybe the therapist doesn't know that providing reassurance to someone with OCD is not going to be the helpful thing for them as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that by being open and honest about things like OCD, there's actually a lot of, you know, hidden gems that can come from people that aren't necessarily therapists. You know, it could be someone that's very experienced in life or been through similar things themselves. Like, you know, I feel like just because someone has a degree in something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be the best person for that individual, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like a lot of things that I've learned have been from various different people, and I think it comes down to sort of what you want to believe, and, you know, what sort of marries up with your the way that your mind works.
I think there's a nice allegory almost to professional sports as well too, because you may have a coach that really inspires you and you work harder for, and there may be other coaches that you just don't feel the connection, and maybe they don't pull out of you the best of your abilities as well too.
Yeah, exactly. And I can say that I've definitely had experiences of both throughout my career. I think it definitely comes down to, the relationship that you can build, and the results are always different depending on who you're working with and how well you're working with them.
Another piece of that too is there may be people who think, I shouldn't need a therapist. I shouldn't have to talk to someone. And I love to use athletes as an example of, it doesn't matter if you're the highest paid athlete in the world, you still have a coach. Right? There's still someone there giving you advice and helping.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the same thing, if we, as athletes, we go to the gym, we train our bodies, we build muscular strength. And, that's an active thing to do. We go to the gym to work on something specific. It's the same concept, really. But for some reason it's, frowned upon, or it was in the earlier years of my career, definitely, because I don't think there was much understanding around it. I do believe that has changed now. And I think that there are more people talking about, problems and mental health issues. But I still don't think it's, it's not been normalized enough. And I definitely, I can 100% say that there are athletes out there right now struggling, and nobody knows.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is definitely a highlight of your book, this idea of mental health and sports. And are almost, I think as you were younger too, as you're describing, almost, are they even allowed to be talked about it together in the same sentence? And I'm so glad now that opportunity is there. And even in the book with your teammates and the contributions they've made at everything, you really opened the door for that. What was the inspiration to talk about specifically mental health in the sporting world?
I think because of my own experience, and also, there's been a lot of people that I've worked with over the years that have that kind of mindset, and it's frustrating because it doesn't take away from your ability. Right. It's something that, yes, it needs work, but like I said before, if I had a relationship with a coach where I can go to them and be completely and utterly honest, and not feel like I need to hide something or turn up to training acting like I'm fine when I'm not, or going into a training session where I'm expected to give 100% when mentally I'm 10%. I think if you can have that level of understanding with player and coach, then all round the game changes, because the players are happier and you play better when you're happier.
Yeah. I won't ask for names, but have there been people who have read the book or heard your story who are in sports who have come up to you and said, you've really opened my eyes to this. You've changed the way I look at things now?
There was definitely a lot of people that reached out over like social media and things like that. And that for me was amazing, because it kind of made me think, I really have done the right thing. And I think as well, it was a bit of a shock for a lot of people, because a lot of coaches and players that I grew up playing with had absolutely no idea that I was suffering the way I was, and because I was hiding it so well. So I think, like you say, it definitely has opened a lot of people's eyes, and it's also encouraged people to kind of be a bit more honest with it. I mean, to me anyway, I've opened a lot of messages where people have opened up and told me stories that they've gone through and things like that, and just that, or encouraging them to sort of seek help and things like that. So that for me was really special, and I definitely, that was sort of the part that I sat down and I was kind of like, oh, actually, I'm quite proud of myself for doing that.
Oh, it's got to be so rewarding to have inspired people like that out of your own story. So thank you for that, and congrats on that as well too. It's
thank you.
In sports, this will not shock you when I say this, but there is uncertainty in sports. You don't know who's going to win the game, right? And Boy, OCD sure hates uncertainty. So did OCD ever try to get into sports for you to try to create some kind of certainty for how you'd play or outcomes or anything like that?
Um, where do I begin?
Well, part two, everyone. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, wanting to be in control of everything and every outcome is, it's just an accident waiting to happen. And especially in any sport, I mean, well, to be honest, any walk of life, but obviously specifically to me, it's football. So, you don't know if you're going to get picked. You don't know if you're going to start. You don't know if you're going to play well. You don't know if you're going to get subbed off. There's so many different things that factor into the uncertainty part. And I think for me, there was the main times I think that I really struggled was when I didn't really know what was next. So, you sign a contract somewhere and when that runs out, it's, well, what now? Like, is anyone going to want me? Am I good enough? Like, and then it's constantly like trying to get reassurance from your agent or, things like that. And that's a very hard place to be because you never feel secure. And especially over in the US, when I played out there was risk of being traded and risk of having your contract waived and things like that. You just had absolutely no idea what was going to happen at any point. And I think by that point, I was more in the mindset of, look, we can't control everything. Not everything is in my control. I can't control the outcome. If I have high expectations, then it will beat me. So, trying to be on a level with yourself while also having a healthy amount of pressure to perform and, a healthy amount of motivation as well. Most of the time I just felt like a mess in my younger years. And when I started to play pro, I turned myself against myself. It was just a constant battle between Millie and OCD. And there's an image that I drew in the book, and it's basically like a picture of my brain and a bow and arrow, and there's all these arrows being shot at the brain, and the ones that are bad all stuck and all the good ones just fell in the bin. And that just sums it up, really. It's just constant, I'm not good enough, and I'm not going to make it. And yeah,
you're so right. OCD has never liked good things. No one's ever come to a session for me and said, I'm afraid everyone loves me and thinks I'm awesome. We don't treat people for that whatsoever. It's always the worst case scenario things. For those who aren't familiar, what and as much as you're willing to tell, I mean, this is not a kind of smash and grab type of thing here, but what ways did OCD really interfere in your life and in your profession as well?
Yeah, so in my life, I think when it comes to outside of football, I think the biggest part for me was the way that it affected the people around me. So my family in particular and ex-partners as well. So, obviously being in a family, I've got a really supportive family, and I'm really close with them. So I felt comfortable to be honest, if that makes sense. I think initially when I was first diagnosed, obviously no one really knew what was going on, but I'm talking, a few years in, and the way that my OCD would affect them in terms of me telling them they need to wash their hands, or telling them they need to get changed, or they need to have a shower, or or doing something that would instantly trigger me and I would have a panic attack. And the way that I could see it was affecting them and the way it was making them feel, honestly, it broke my heart. And I think that is massively part of the reason why I was so determined to sort of do something about it, because it's not only something affecting me and that I'm trying to deal with, it's actually having this, chain reaction on everyone around me, when it's, it's supposed to be a comfortable home to live in, and then there's me trying to dictate everyone's actions because my OCD's been triggered.
Yeah. Well, and the eggshells then that family or friends feel like they have to walk on in order for you to be okay. And that's a lot of pressure, obviously, on everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it definitely caused a lot of tension. I mean, I think it would always result in me just breaking down, really, and just, screaming, I'm sorry, because I didn't know what else to do, and because I needed them to do what it was telling me, but I didn't want them to, because I didn't want to be that person.
Yeah.
That was so hard. It was such a struggle. And like I said, it's the same with ex-partners as well. And even with some of my friends, not to the same extent, because I think I was so embarrassed. I think deep down, I felt so embarrassed that sometimes at home I would secretly go and clean something, or secretly slip out the side and then go out into the car and clean something that I remembered that needed to be cleaned. And it's just like exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And I just felt like this detective, constant, 24/7. There's no rest for your brain. It was just aware of everything, not walking down the street, just enjoying being present. It was, right, where are they walking? What are they touching? What's getting contaminated, and what am I going to have to do about it to prevent me from having a panic attack or an anxiety breakdown? So I think the way that it affected my family, and I mean, I'll never forget, that feeling, and it was awful.
Did that go into sport too? Like the football's dirty and you can't, or where were those cleats or anything, or even running into people on the pitch or something like that? I mean,
So I think, because a major one for me was cleanliness, and things being contaminated, but for whatever reason, it sort of targeted certain people. And I think maybe that was because I might have happened to have seen them do something that triggered it, or said something that would have triggered it. So a lot of the time, I wasn't even paying attention to the training sessions. I wasn't, listening to what the coach was saying. I was completely in my own world, and just like playing this detective role of, I know that this has happened. She's touched that, so if I touch that, then that means it's on my boots, and then if I tie my laces, then it's on my hands. And then if I touch it was awful. So a lot of the time, during training sessions, I run inside, act like I needed to go to the toilet when actually I was just washing my hands.
Wow.
And that's like mid-session, where that's work, that's where I'm putting the work in to be able to play at the end and try and do well. And the OCD was affecting that, and I hid it so well. I think that also exhausted me.
Yeah. What finally leads you to decide, no more? I've got to make changes here. This is not the way to live. This is not the way to be.
So obviously I saw various counsellors and therapists and things like that, and each one did help me in different ways, for sure. I think as I got older and I started to understand OCD more, that definitely helped. But when I was at my worst and it was stopping me from essentially living a happy life, everything was misery, because you're pre-planning, or avoiding, like, I'm not going because that potentially could happen, and then it will cause this. And that's not a happy life to live. That's not the way I wanted to live my life. I'd like to think of myself as an ambitious person, and I've always wanted to do well in my career and things like that. And I think making the decision to myself, I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to let this control me. And one of my all-time favourite quotes is, and it always will be, is rule your mind or it will rule you. And it just hits home every time I read it or hear it. It's just so true. And I think when I was younger, I'd look at it and I'd appreciate it and I'd like it, but I wouldn't act on it. And I think the difference is acting on it and being brave enough not to quit. Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
But being brave enough to put yourself in a vulnerable position or an uncomfortable position to be able to make yourself stronger, to make the next step. And
isn't it fascinating? You'll go to the gym, you'll work out, you will push your body to the limits, you will feel like you're going to collapse and maybe even feel invigorated by that. But there are other times, if we ask somebody to do that mentally, because that's what it would involve in therapy, there's almost I can't do it. I won't be able to handle that. I won't be able to deal with it. Was that a struggle for you as well too? Like, I can only push myself so far and then I have to stop? Or
yeah, it was kind of weird actually, and I was talking to my parents about it earlier. When I was in therapy at the same time, and I'd had however many amount of sessions, and she was about to introduce exposure therapy to me. Mm-hmm. So I've told me what it entailed and all of that. And I think my OCD almost convinced me, or whatever it was. I it's so complicated and the mind is so fascinating that I just, half the time I'm just like, how?
Yeah. What?
Convinced that, that I'm okay, I can deal with it, I'll handle it. And then I wouldn't go to therapy for a while. And then maybe a couple of months would pass and the OCD would be unbearable. I didn't have a choice but to go back. Yeah. And I think that happened 2 or 3 times, that when exposure therapy was mentioned, I sort of just bottled it, I guess. And I convinced myself I was okay and I could deal with it and now I'll be all right. Like, I've got this under control. Obviously in reality I didn't. But I think with the exposure therapy, I believe that I have done that in a way of, okay, so I didn't go to therapy and I didn't put my hand in the sanitary bin or whatever, but I did move to a different country to play football. And that's something that I would never ever have been able to do. Or I did sit on that toilet seat and these little bits of exposure. Sure. And things like that I've sort of built up over time. And I think I still struggle with my OCD now, but it's nowhere near, like, it's not the same. And hand on heart, it's just not near it. And I believe that that's because I've thrown myself into these situations that I never thought I would be able to do. And that's purely because I wanted to make a change, and I did, if that makes sense. So I don't think there's sort of black or white to it. It's very much each step as it comes.
And you did the key piece. I think sometimes people might get afraid. They hear exposure and they think we're just going to expose you. But the key component of all this, and what you've described too, is the response prevention, the elimination of the compulsion, just allowing yourself to learn, look at that bad thing didn't happen, or wow, that was nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be and that my brain told me. I mean, when you learn that OCD lies to you all day long, hopefully life starts to get easier because you don't have to believe it so much.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we have so many thousands and thousands of thoughts a day, and we do actually have the power to choose which ones we listen to and which ones we want to listen to. And I think, obviously, I chose to listen to the wrong ones, which caused the spiral in the OCD, and it was just a constant, it turns into a constant cycle that you cannot break, and even the thought of trying to break it just ruins you, So, yeah, I think exactly.
I love that description, because just because you hear a thought doesn't mean you have to listen to it, right?
No. Thoughts are not fact.
There you go. Yeah. Images, urges, however the obsession comes through, definitely are not facts. Yeah. And that is just so important for people to understand. And I think, as you've described some turning points in your life, once you were able to do that, look at the changes you were able to make and the things you were able to do and face too.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't change any of it. I really wouldn't. I think, there's been so much adversity throughout my career and my life outside of football. But the amount that I've learned and the way that I was willing to learn from it and sort of have a different perspective on life is just, you can't put a price on that. And that's why I encourage people to talk and to share their experiences, because ultimately we can't learn unless we experience, it's, yeah. And a lot of the book is about that, to be honest. It's about what I've been through and how I used to deal with it compared to how I deal with it now, and how things used to affect me compared to how they affect me now. And a massive part of that is because of my football journey and not ending up where I thought I would or where I expected to, because of what I wanted to happen when I was younger. You can't plan your life. You can't plan what's going to happen tomorrow. And I think being able to learn that and experience that is, that's the beauty behind all of the shit, basically. Sorry.
Oh, no. It's all good. She said shit, everyone. It's okay. You talk a lot about friends who might deny the importance of mental health. And when people will say things in those moments, even those people who say, you have to just have the mental strength to overcome it. And why don't you just have the mental strength to overcome it? Have you, over the course of your life and your career, developed a really good response to that so people can understand in a better way?
I haven't, to be honest, but I think when it comes to things like that, it's kind of like, well, you can't help everyone, or you can't make everybody see something the way you see it, or I think there's a lot of people that may not have experienced something that has caused them to feel anxiety or depression or OCD and all those horrible things. So how can we expect them to understand it? I think there's a difference between understanding it and having respect for it, and compared to it doesn't exist. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because it clearly does exist, and everybody knows someone that has been through something that is, that's caused a massive downfall in their life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're right. A mutual respect, even without a full understanding, sounds like a really key component for the world to be a much nicer place, right?
Yeah. And I think just a bit of, common empathy for human beings, it's having the ability to understand that I hear what you're going through. I can't resonate because I haven't been through it, but it sounds awful. You know what I mean? And just having that respect and just, it is a thing. It is something that people experience every single day, and it's a real thing, a real problem.
There's athletes out there now, maybe just starting, maybe in the prime of their career, who have mental health issues, because mental health issues don't discriminate against anyone. They are an equal opportunity effector. What's your best pieces of advice to people who are on this path that you've been through already?
I think, a major one for me was accepting. So accepting what I may have been going through at the time, whether that be an injury that was causing me anxiety or, borderline depression. I think the sooner you can accept what is happening to you, the sooner you can get on with dealing with how you're going to change the narrative and turn this into a positive, rather than live in this, dwelling sadness.
Yeah.
And that's a massive, and that's a choice, that's a decision that someone, actively needs to make, I believe. And that's what I sort of try and do, these days, day to day, whatever situation I'm in. I try and be rational, because obviously we all know that OCD is irrational.
Yeah. That was a joke, everyone. Yeah.
And accept things for what they are, accept where I'm at whatever stage in my life. And I think a big one for me was the expectation thing. So I would have such high expectations of myself, and when I didn't, get to that point or achieve what I thought I was going to achieve, then it was like the end of the world. And I think I'm going to swear again.
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
Expectations will fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
And arguing with reality will fuck you. And if you argue with reality, then you lose 100% of the time.
Amen, sister. There you go. Yeah. I've never won an argument with OCD. I can tell you that. I don't even try anymore, because I already know the outcome. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So advice, people aren't alone. I think that's a massive thing for me as well, because when I did first start going through it, I did feel alone, completely and utterly alone, and I felt like I was a weirdo, and I was so embarrassed and ashamed of why my mind was working the way it was. And I just urge people to understand that it's actually so normal, and OCD isn't the only thing out there that might make you feel like you're not normal. But so many people go through this, and so many people have these experiences, and it doesn't change who you are as a person. Like, it's not, you're still human, you're still you're just struggling with something, and it's something that can be helped, and it's something that you can eventually get over. So I guess sort of giving people hope as well, which is why I was just so vulnerable, because if I can be that vulnerable and that open, then first of all, no one can judge me. I've judged myself up, I've judged myself up over the years, and like, just have it. Read it if you want to read it. Don't read it if you don't want to read it. But this is my truth. These are my experiences, and I just put it out there in hope that it would help a lot of people, and a lot of people would be able to resonate with it, and luckily they did.
Yeah. You also described how, in many ways, I believe it was your dad was one of the first person who you felt really understood what was going on. What was so just powerful about finding a person who got you in all of this?
Well, actually, initially he was a little bit in denial about it.
Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So when we didn't know what it was, I was obviously, going around the house doing all of these strange things, and I was just crying all the time because I felt like I didn't know what was happening to me. That was when my mum called the doctors, and we went, and then he referred me, which ultimately resulted in the OCD diagnosis. And then I had a counselling session because I was so young. My first counselling session, my mum and dad actually came into as well. And I think that part was really eye-opening for them because...
There we go.
Yeah, because she was obviously asking me all the right questions and I was being completely honest, because I like to think of myself as an honest person, you know, like why hide anything or why lie about things? I wanted to get help and I knew something wasn't right. So the only way you can ultimately be free is if you're, first of all, honest with yourself. So I was completely honest, and then I think after that it was very much like, okay, wow, this is definitely not right. This is a problem. And the support that they've given me throughout my whole life has been insane. And I know that there are people out there that don't have that. But like you say, it is so important to find someone or have someone that you do feel like is listening and you do feel like they're making an effort to understand. That's definitely huge, and it gives you almost like a massive weight off your shoulders.
Sure.
Because you know you go from carrying around this horrible thing every single day, and just being able to be honest with someone about it is huge.
Through all of this, everything you've done, the writing, the playing, the injuries, the therapy, how would you describe your life now versus that point of that first injury when you're just in your head so much? How have things changed?
I'm happy.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
So, yeah, like, I mean, I feel so much better in my head. I understand the way that my mind works, and you know, if I do have like a little slip up or a blip, then the way that I handle it is so much better than I used to. And I think it's almost like I feel like I've become more emotionally intelligent as well, and trying to make an effort of understanding why I may have felt the way I felt. I think because I've made an effort to try and actually get to the bottom of that, or get to the bottom of why that made me feel the way it did, or why am I in this situation and this is how I'm thinking when I should be thinking like this. It's just almost analysing my thoughts, and I really got somewhere with that. And I think writing the book over a space of 4 years was also a type of therapy for me. So I was able to kind of read back to a few years ago and where my OCD was at, and I'd be like, oh my God, like I've come on leaps and bounds. And I think that's something that I do sort of recommend to people, is sort of journaling. And, you know, you write down how you feel on this day 2 years ago, and you stumble upon it 2 years later and you read it. Oh my God, like I've actually come on, and I'm so much better than I was, or how I don't remember feeling like that sort of thing. And it's just really important to sort of make yourself aware of where you have been and where you've got to, and everything in between. Like there's nothing straightforward about life. And I think the reality of that is that's what makes it so beautiful. Like no one wants a life where you know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. It's just boring.
Yeah. And you've had some spice sprinkled in your life, that's for sure.
Spice in there.
Well, Millie, thank you so much for this, for joining us today, and inspiring people, and really touching a group of people who we hope will really be inspired in the athletic world, and to really be open and embrace this aspect of mental health as well too. And I thank you for your courage, and not only on the field but off as well too, very much.
No, thank you so much for having me. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read a little passage from my book, just to
please
entice the listener.
Yes, the floor is yours, please.
So this is from the chapter No Rain, No Flower. Okay, so The weather is always changing. Life is always changing. If it rained yesterday, who's to say it won't rain tomorrow? If something bad happened today, who's to say something bad won't happen tomorrow? But what we do know is we are growing. We are being watered with experience, showered with lessons. It's only the people who open their eyes to see what is, to understand what is, to live what is, who can see the beauty in a rainstorm and the beauty in a life lesson, no matter how cruel and difficult it may be. I used to hate bad experiences, trauma, injuries, inconveniences, uncertainty, mistakes, OCD. All of these things I used to absolutely detest. I used to say, why me? I don't deserve this. It shouldn't be this way. All until one day it clicked. One day I could look back and see that every single one of these things has helped me understand who I am, understanding life and so much more. Gratitude, appreciation. There is nothing to gain from fighting with reality, fighting with what is. There are only facts, only truth. And when you accept the truth, then you will be unstoppable.
That's awesome. Well, I couldn't think of a better way to end than that quote. So thank you for sharing that very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it as well. Thank you.
And thank all of you for listening once again to the Get to Know OCD podcast. If you want to listen to more episodes, go to the NOCD YouTube channel. And if you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. We look forward to seeing you again in a future episode. Thanks for watching.